Welcome to Living Liberation with psychologist Dr. Norissa Williams. Living Liberation invites you into discussion about how we embody liberation individually and collectively. We explore liberation in our relationships, school, and work contexts, and in society at large. We challenge and cultivate thinking that moves us all towards collective liberation. So hello, today we are here with Kerry Luo. So nice to have you, Kerry.
Nice to be here.
So I've known Kerry now, is it since 2017? That's like almost 5 years, right? So Kerry was a student
Oh my God.
I know, right?
That's that's crazy.
In an undergraduate class called Cultures of Psychology. And so we came to know each other. And then we developed a relationship, mentorship, even like thinking about career, having conversations in my office. And so I remember even when in the midst of the Black Lives Matter resurgence after George Floyd was murdered, you, Kerry, reached out to me and you asked me, like how I was doing. And we were talking about it since these are kinds of conversations that we had already had before. And I remember thinking I was just thinking about you because I had gone to an anti-Asian hate crime kind of speaking event, and it had gotten me to thinking about conversations that we had had, but they were very kind of like minimal kinds of conversations about the experiences between Asian Americans and Black Americans, and kind of like bridging that divide, those kinds of conversations. And so I said, I almost forgot how it happened. I had to look up, how did we even start this? But we engaged in this really beautiful process of writing each other back and forth in a dual ethnography. And so I shared with Kerry a write-up, because as part of another organization, they said if you attend it and you write it up, we would have gotten compensated. And so I shared with her my feelings from the workshop that I had, and you all will get to read that as well. And then we engaged in this beautiful writing back and forth, right? So Kerry, is that how you remember it? Did I forget anything?
Yes, exactly.
Okay. So it's been 2 years since then. I'm wondering, what was that experience like for you? I mean, there's a lot to think about here in terms of we're racially different, even though we're people of color, but I was once your faculty, your faculty member. Like, I don't know, just what was that experience like for you?
I felt just so cathartic, like going through that experience with you. I think especially during the time of like the height of the pandemic, like all of the Black Lives Matter protests and like anti-Asian hate going on all at the same time, and like being isolated and locked down. Just I just didn't know like how to process all of that, and I felt like an outlet was needed. And I don't, maybe it was some kind of alignment. I feel like this project really was an outlet for me to get through that. I've always been a very reflective and like introspective person, and so I really enjoyed this experience, and it was just a time for me in the midst of everything that was going on to process through it and have my thoughts exist like outside of my own head. So, yeah.
That's so true. You put it in a context, like when we're going through something, like we don't always think about this broader context, right? So you put it in context like this. I'm like, yes, I probably needed an outlet too. And I probably didn't think of it in that way. I thought of it more like, how can we bridge this divide between us? Like there's something that needs to be explored here with respect to us both being people of color. We called it the oppressor between us, right? And so, but you're so right at all of that. It was definitely cathartic for me. It was affirming in so many ways. We had already been connected, but I felt like I grew. Like there's a love that I feel for you that will never be undone because of the bridge that we cross and the intimacy that we develop in those moments, right? And like really thinking about our shared experiences. as well as how those experiences may, they may have overlapped, but there were points in which they were a little bit different. And then I gained this appreciation for you, your personal experience, but also a broader appreciation for the Asian American experience, and and just kind of just filling it out that much more. You know what I mean? Because sometimes you can have a limited perspective. I know what it's like to be Black in America. I know what it is to
Mhm.
be, to come from an immigrant family. I know what it is to be a Black woman, right? And I know those things so well. I don't know your experience. I didn't know your experience, and I was also super grateful for you to have let me in that way.
Mhm. Mhm.
I'm wondering.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. I was just gonna add on, like, it goes both ways in that the mentorship from you was so valuable to me, and I really feel like we reached this point of empathy where instead of like, "Oh, I'm stepping into your shoes and I wanna know what it's like," it's a lens of like, I will never know what it's like. And my community has played a role in the hurt that your community has been going through. And like, what are we going to do about that? And how are we going to move through that? And so to have you as a guide throughout this was really valuable to me too.
That's so meaningful. When we think through a trauma lens, right? So a lot of the I mean, racial trauma, we know racial trauma is real. A lot of why people have an issue, well, or challenge, I should say, healing from trauma is because it's not validated, it's not seen. You know what I mean? It's not socially even sanctioned, like within the larger environment and different things like that. So for you to say, oh no, it's real and I see it, that was huge for me. I wanted, and I hope that I communicated that to you too, because I wanted to give you back that gift too. And I wanted to say, but I see you too. I see your pain too. And that is equally as important to me. Did you feel that?
Yes. Yes. I've always felt that from you. So
Okay,
thank you.
good. Thank you. So now, even thinking, moving on, so you started an MSW, Masters in Social Work program right after that, right?
Mhm.
And I mean, things have changed. I mean, people had heightened emotions initially. I mean, there's lots of polls and data that says that immediately after, people said that we should recognize Black lives, right? But then by a few months later, that had decreased even more than before the pandemic started, right? So there has been like a tapering off, even though I do still feel like there's a solid people who recommitted or committed in a way that have not, there is a group that did not turn back, right? So I say that. And what I really want to ask you is, did this process, this dual ethnography had later impact for you?
Definitely. I know in the academic space, and something we had talked about within the project as well is like that repression of voice and that silence of what we've been taught, especially in these predominantly white spaces, that like our voices are inherently not as important as whatever the dominant voice is. And so I, yeah, I made these promises to myself that I would just be more unfiltered and authentic. And for me personally, within my own program, I made sure to speak out in classes when I had something to say. And I think that that impact has brought me more confidence and validation in just like believing that my voice matters and can take up space within this field, as well as the ways that I show up for other people, other like marginalized people in my program who speak out and call things out. So it was a huge impact.
I'm so glad that we're having this conversation. So it's a different conversation if we had it like immediately after. I'm so glad that we're having this conversation 2 years later, because now just even hearing you, I'm thinking of things in new and different ways, right? Because I'm like, right, that year. I mean, I think we were all collectively going through something, right? I mean, with COVID and then with, the resurgence of the Black Lives Matter movement, right? But now that I'm thinking back, I didn't even, I mean, I knew that it was so great to have that experience to you, but with you. But now that I'm thinking back, I was the most vocal socially and publicly in the work setting in the 2 years since you and I wrote. And hearing you, I'm like, that is a parallel process that happened for me. Like I had gotten one, I felt validated and seen, and I knew that it was real, right? But also I had gotten practice in writing to you and really thinking about what these things, and it was, and I think I mentioned it in the writing too, like that I was finding liberation, right? Like so I had already been teaching about these things for years because you met me like under that in that course, right? But how I was thinking was really beginning to change, and I was taking a liberation lens and really thinking about healing from internalized oppression, thinking about how I've self-silenced so for so long and uprooting that. So actually, it was so healing. Actually, it was. Now I'm thinking about it. It was so healing, and just thinking about like the ways that we excavated, like some of the things that were like so buried deep, and had become so much a part of me. I'm
Mhm.
talking about it, and I'm having even a greater appreciation for you in that process. What
Yes,
potential did you were you going to say something?
I was, but I forgot
Sorry,
it.
sorry, sorry.
Go ahead.
I was going to say what potential. So when we had done this, right, one of the things that we had said was like this was an amazing process. This is something that we would want to take outside like as an intervention, right? What potential do you think that this has for like personal change?
Actually, like this literally just reminded me of what I was going to say. Based on just like, I feel like as people in the field, like people like you teach about liberation and oppression and all of these systems all the time. But then, like, I feel like, especially within the work setting and when it's in like a professional setting, there's a lack of space for the inward process and the inward growth with all of that. And I feel like I can talk about it with other people, but it's harder to apply it to myself and to have that recognition and that like genuine understanding that, oh, I deserve this, right? And to reach that level of comfort where you feel comfortable and secure enough in yourself to be able to speak out and to be able to disrupt spaces and make those changes, I think is an important process. And it has to start with the personal reflection.
I love how you said that. You said I should have written it down. You said in workplaces there's not a lot of space for inward reflection. I mean, I love that for so many reasons, right? Because that's really decolonial to think in workspaces it shouldn't be about production, because white supremacy culture says progress is bigger, more, sense of urgency, all those sorts of things, right? So it's really decolonial and anti-oppressive to think in workspaces there should be time for this. And I also like it because within that was my intention also with this course. Like, let's do some consciousness raising, right? Because I know that there is already a level of consciousness raising, but let's do it from a systems perspective instead of like a single issue kind of perspective. But also the in order for you to be a better practitioner, you have to do this work. And so my attempt was to build in that inward space and inward reflecting. And I feel like you really affirm that in your saying that because we really don't have spaces for the practice of mindfulness and introspection and different things like that. And
Yeah, yeah.
mhm,
Like it's seen as in academia, it's seen as like a topic of discussion or something external, like something that exists outside of us. And so there's no space to be like, this is actually real. And like this is very personal and has to also exist outside of the academic space and the professional space.
I love it. I love it. And I also feel like I'm so proud of you. Like, I'm fortunate to have known you 5 years ago when you were still developing. And so to see to see the way that you have like blossomed and flourished now, just the way that you're thinking. I'm so happy for you too. So, do you have additional words on, so we spoke more generally, even like about how this has, personal growth benefits, right? But when thinking about racial hierarchies, right, particular racial hierarchies in general, but even racial hierarchies as they relate to people of color and how people of color are stratified with anti-Blackness being the base, right? What are your thoughts about the potential for this assignment for dealing with internalized oppression this way?
Well, I think that I might be biased, but everyone can benefit from this assignment, in my opinion. I really do think that, like, wherever your positionality is, there is like some internalized oppression there. And it's like to be able to work through that is already a privilege in itself, and to have the time to do that. And so, yeah, to your question, I do think that it has great potential for people to be able to think differently, and to evolve the way that they're currently thinking about these structures, because it shows up everywhere. Like, it shows up in the classroom, it shows up in the therapeutic space, and like change can't happen if we are still stuck in the same system.
I completely agree. So in thinking about what advice would you give people as they embark on this exercise, right? I think it's necessary to be honest. And I think both of you and I were like really honest with each other. What else would you say is necessary to get the most meaning from an exercise or assignment like this?
For me, the most important thing is just authenticity. There's always a fear within, like, as we were talking about the professional like the workplace or the classroom, there's always this filter of like, oh, this isn't appropriate. And so I want that to be removed for whoever else might be doing this. And I also want the power differential to be removed of like, oh, I'm submitting this to someone who is like higher up than me, because that's where the problem is. And so to start to remove that and deconstruct that, even in the most micro way, is going to be a necessary part.
I think so. That brings another question to mind. I have a limited perspective since given what our relationship was, I was like one up with respect to hierarchies, being faculty and you being a student. I felt very, I mean, not that I think I try to decentralize power as much as I can, even in my teaching anyway. But my experience writing, I felt like because we had allowed ourselves to be, I guess, this intimately engaged with each other, that there was a leveling of the power and a sense of feeling on equal peers with each other. I felt that, but you're in a different position from me. Did you feel that or no?
Yeah, absolutely. And I remember I was also in a position too where I was like, oh, is this like, am I imposing more labor onto her? And like, you were like, no, like, so it like it goes both ways as well. But I didn't feel that way.
Good. So thank you so much for your time. Before we close, is there I don't know if there's any remaining thought that you had?
No, I think we touched upon everything, and I appreciate you so much for your guidance and your mentorship.
Thank you. And I appreciate you too, for sure. This is a process. It's like, what else can we write about? This is a process I would do over and over and again with you. So thank you so much for what you've had to share with everyone today.
Of course, thank you.
Thanks for listening. If you've loved what we've had to say, please press the subscribe button and don't forget to like. We invite you to also follow Dr. Norissa on Instagram at Dr. Norissa Williams and learn more about my professional services on liberationrpi.com.